Hi guys, this video is part of a series of video shorts created from a set of masterclasses developed by Think Big and Young Rewired State. Each workshop was supported by an organisation with experience in the field. This workshop was supported directly by Young Rewired State, who strive to show young people how learning to code can empower them to create real-world changes. This guide is a very brief introduction to the basics of computer coding. Coding is a way of giving a computer instructions to make things happen on screen, like displaying a website. We're going to look at the 3 different coding languages you need to make one. We're going to look at HTML and CSS and touch briefly on JavaScript. We'll explain more about what these are as we get to them. We're going to end with an exercise where you build a to-do list, which will pull together some of the skills you have learned and let you flex your coding muscles. This is a very quick run-through. Make sure you pause this video and have a go as we go along, or it might not make much sense. Learning HTML basics. HTML is a language used to put content on your website. All of the titles, text, pictures and videos, as well as everything else, is put on a website using HTML. It works using tags, which we'll explain more about shortly. First of all, open codepen.io. This is a website which lets you input code and see how it would look if it was a real website. When you've got the hang of it, you can save projects and build whole websites using CodePen. Hit the New Pen button at the top of the page. There are 4 windows. The white one is your preview panel, and the other 3 let you input your code. We're going to focus on the HTML one for now. Type the phrase, "Hello there," into the HTML pane. You'll see that it's come up in the preview panel, but we aren't telling the computer how to present it. We do this using the HTML tags. Tags always start with an arrow and end with an arrow. Try again, but this time start with a tag. Type H1 hello there into your CodePen. You'll see that the text has changed to become bold and bigger. This is because we've told the computer that we're using a H1 tag, which stands for header 1. There are other header levels all the way to 6. Headers should only be used to write titles for sections of your website. H1 is generally your page title, then you might use H2 for a subtitle and H3 for section headers. On the second line, write the following. P stands for paragraph. Using a P tag tells the computer we're going to input some normal text into a site. You would use a P tag to write all the main bits of text in a web page. You'll find that your paragraph text looks exactly the same as your header text. The computer has counted everything after the H1 tag as part of the H1 because we didn't close our tags. This is important. If ever your code isn't working, check you've closed all your tags properly. Close your tags properly like this. It should change so that your header is bigger than your paragraph text. Now we're going to add a bulleted list. You could make a list of your favourite things. The tag for a list is UL, which stands for unordered list. And for each of the list items, we do LI, which stands for list item. Add this code to your HTML pane. Where it says point 1, point 2 and point 3, put in your favourite things in the world. Adding an image. Now let's have a go at adding an image. You'll need an image hosted online and the direct image link for it. You can use this one of the Young Rewired State logo, or if you're finding one from a website, right-hand click the image and hit Copy Image URL. The image tag is img src. Add this line to your code. Make sure you use the complete web address and that you put it in quote marks. There are a couple of things here. Firstly, this tag has an attribute which adds more information to our element. In this case, the element is an image, and the attribute tells us the source of the image. Also, this tag is different because it doesn't need to be closed like our other tags. There aren't many tags that work like this. You should assume that all tags need to be closed properly unless told otherwise. These are all the basics of HTML which we'll cover in this video. Being able to add headers, text and pictures is more than enough to get you going. Have a go at creating an About Me page to go with your list. You could have a bio and a contact details section, each with a header and some text under it. Now let's get creative. Learning CSS basics. CSS is what makes a page look good. You'll see that the HTML text is black on a white background in a boring font. That's because HTML is all about adding content. If you want to change the font, colour, background or any other style element of it, we use CSS. For this we're going to use the CSS pane in CodePen. First of all, we need to adjust a setting. Click the settings icon on the CSS pane and make sure it says normalize. CSS is structured like this. The element tells the computer what part of our web page you want to change the look of. In here you put the HTML tag for whichever bit of content you want to style, H1 for example. The property is what you would like to change about that element, like the font size, and then the value is how you want it to look. We could say 100 pixels here. In this example, H1 colour red, our element is H1, so we're styling the header. The property is colour, so we're going to change the colour of the font, and the value is red, so the text should turn red. Go ahead and type it in. Notice the American spelling of the word colour. Try typing in some other colours and see what happens. There are loads of properties you can change using CSS. We're going to jump in and start using some. You can find a list of selectors and how to use them here. We're going to change the background, text colour and justification of the H1 element. We can change more than one property at a time by adding semicolons after each piece of info. Type the following. Your H1 should now have white text on a red background. The width makes the red bar go across the whole page, and text aligns centres our text. Padding adds some space to the inside of an element, which is what makes the red header background get bigger around the text. Try changing the colour and background values to different colours, or the width percentage. Different text line options are centre, left or right. Again, notice the American spelling for the word centre. Now we're going to style our list and our list items. We do this in exactly the same way. Instead of H1 outside of our bracket, we put UL space LI. This lets the computer know that we want to style the list and the list items that we wrote in our HTML pane earlier. Have a go at writing this code into your CSS pane. There are some new CSS selectors here. They're explained in red writing. You don't need to add that text to your code. Your list items should now have lovely blue boxes around them. This time we've added a margin. Remember how padding added space inside, making our header have a really big background? Margins add space outside of an element, making a gap between the element and other things on the page. The border radius adds a rounded edge to the boxes. Again, you can take this opportunity to mess with the values to see what changes. That's the end of our introduction to CSS. Have a go at changing some other elements, properties and their values. This website has a brilliant list of CSS properties. If you click on any one of them, it will give you a breakdown of what values you can change within that property, as well as some tips on how to write it. Remember to always follow this format: element, squiggly bracket, property, colon, value, semicolon, squiggly bracket. The to-do list project. We're going to have a go at creating a to-do list. When we are finished, you'll be able to type an item into a text box, click a button and add that text to a to-do list. Open a new CodePen window for this exercise. There are some pretty tricky bits to this, with some bits that we haven't already covered. This is a link to the completed bit of code for this project in case you go wrong. It's case sensitive, so make sure you get all the capitals in the right place. It should open a finished version of the list we're about to create. Let's create and style the heading. Put this code into your HTML pane. We've created a H1 tag before, but this time we're going to put it in a header. This is coding best practice. It doesn't alter how the page looks at all, but it helps to make your code easier to read. You use it specifically for your page header. Now style your header using this code in the CSS pane like we did before. Make sure you've normalized the CSS from the settings like we did last time. This time we've used a hex code to specify what colour we want our background to be. This is a more precise way of picking a colour. This code refers to the YRS brand colour. You can find more hex codes from this website. Now let's add a text box. To do this, we're going to use a new tag called input. This is like the image tag from earlier, which closes differently to normal tags. Add this code to your HTML under the header. This tag has an attribute called type, like the image tag from earlier. So after the equal sign, you can specify what kind of input you want. We have put text in it because we want a text box. Try changing the word text to date, or password, or file, and see how it affects the input. Make sure you change it back to text afterwards. Now let's add a label for our box so people know what it's for. The text in between the opening and closing tags is the text that will be seen on our page. In this case, it will say, "What would you like to remember?" Add this code just above your input code. We're going to make it so that when you click "What would you like to remember?" it selects the text box so you can start typing. To do this, we need to link the label to the box somehow. We do that by naming the box in the code with something called an ID. Then we can link the label to the box by referring to the name that we gave it in the code. This piece of code shows what that looks like. It's the same code we've already typed with some extra bits. The input line has a new attribute called ID, as well as the type one we already have. We've given the input box an ID of to do. This is a name that we have made up, not a coding term. You could call it whatever you want. On the top line, we've added an attribute called for to our code. This means we can tell the computer what our label is for. In this case, it is for our output box, which we called to do. Edit the code so that it looks like this. Let's style it. This is a style sheet to make our list look pretty. You can skip this step, but your to-do list might look a little bit different. You can type it in, or you can copy it from the example. As you can see, the first rule refers to the label. You will see a new CSS property called display. It changes whether elements appear on a new line of the page, block, or next to the last item in the page, in line. The second rule refers to the box itself. Now let's add a button. Add this code to your code pen. The top line goes in your HTML panel and we'll add some text, Go, which will act as our button. We've added an attribute called class. This is similar to when we named our text box using an ID in the last step. The difference here is that IDs are unique, which means that we can link one thing to another very specifically. A class can be applied to several different things in your HTML code. So we could have a couple of headers, a text box, and a paragraph, all with the same class. Then later, if we wanted to style all of those things at once in our CSS sheet, we could just refer to the class which had all of those things in it, rather than trying to type out the same rule for each one of those elements in that class separately. Basically, it's a shortcut. Coders love shortcuts. The second two lines need to go in your CSS pane. You'll notice that in the top rule there is a dot after the P. CSS uses dots to tell the computer we are about to reference a class. In the last step, we created a class called Go for our P tag. So in this bit of code, we are telling the computer to style the content included in the P tag, but specifically to style the content of any P tags on the page that are labelled as being part of the class that we called Go. When you have a complicated long website's worth of code, you might have 3 headers that are styled with blue font and 3 that are styled with red font. This is how you would make sure the computer knows which one you are referring to when you're writing your CSS. The second CSS rule here has a new attribute too. phover. Hover is an example of a pseudo class. We use these to tell the computer to style something in a particular way, but only when something is happening to that element. In this case, when someone hovers over the button with the mouse, which we added as a P tag in our HTML already, it will change colour. Now we will have to create our list, which we will add items to. We've done this before, but for reference, add this code to your HTML underneath your existing code. Here is some suggested styling for your list to go into your CSS pane underneath what you've already got. There are a couple of new properties here, don't worry about them for now. Or you could just have a go at styling it for yourself. Adding JavaScript. JavaScript is what makes a website interactive. If your page has buttons or forms, JavaScript is what makes them work. JavaScript can also be used to code games. We're going to use JavaScript to make our button add items to our list. First of all, we need to change one setting. Click the settings icon in the JS panel, and from the quick add menu, click jQuery. JavaScript is really fiddly if you're not used to it. It's got some pretty advanced stuff for a beginner's guide. We're going to go through it so that you have an idea of the 3 elements of a web page. Don't worry if it doesn't make sense. You can start coding a web page with just HTML and CSS and work up to JavaScript later. Go ahead and type in this bit of code to your JavaScript panel, then we'll discuss the format. The $sign is called an event listener. It tells the computer to listen for something to happen. The next set of brackets explain what we're listening to. In this case, it's for the button that we created earlier and named it in a class called Go. So now the computer knows to keep an eye on the p.go button. The next bit tells the computer that is waiting for someone to click the p.go button. Next, we need to put in the function that will happen when the p.go button gets clicked, which we're going to look at now. Put this piece of code in between the last 2 squiggly brackets in the code you've just written. Remember, you can copy and paste it in if you need to from here. Let's have a go at breaking this down. The word var refers to variables. Variables are really important in coding. In this instance, having a variable allows you to store whatever is to the right of the equal sign as the word item. Now, whenever you want to type that code in, all you have to do is type item instead. Remember, coders love shortcuts. .val gets the value of an element. In this case, the item we called to-do at the start of this exercise. Using a hash sign tells the computer you're referring to an ID. Same as using a dot tells the computer you're referring to a class, like we did in p.go. The to-do element is actually referring to the text input box we created at the start of this exercise. Remember, input ID equals to-do type text. We end each instruction with a semicolon. What this means is that when the Go button is clicked, whatever is written in the text box is stored in a variable called item. The second line has the same format that we use to tell the computer to listen for the Go button being clicked. The $sign and the UL tag tell the computer to listen to the list that we created, and then the next bit tells the computer to prepend it. That means to add something to the end of it. The next set of brackets has a function we want the computer to carry out. In this case, it opens a new list item, adds some text, then closes the list item. That might sound confusing, but basically we're typing this. Everything should work. Again, this is complex stuff, so don't worry if you got a bit lost. You can work up to using JavaScript when you're ready. Good stuff. If you're serious about learning to code, there are loads of places you can start. Code Academy has loads of free lessons you can start taking. They go up in complexity so you can work at your own pace. Or you could try this course on Tuts Plus. It has 30 short videos to work through to build up your HTML and CSS skills before moving on to JavaScript. Good luck!